In the second case, sons, which are the collective strengths of a possible revolt, abandon their fathers on behalf of despair. But emancipatory politics is possible only when some fathers and mothers and some sons and daughters are allied in an effective negation of the world as it is. With all that in mind, we can now read the poem in English. The translation is by Norman McAfee.
Victory. All politics is realpolitik, warring so with your delicate anger. You do not recognize a soul other than this one, which has all the prose of the clever man, l'homme habile, of the revolutionary devoted to the honest common man, even the complicity with the assassins of the bitter years grafted onto protector classicism, which makes the communist respectable. You do not recognize the heart that becomes slave to its enemy and goes where the enemy goes, led by a history that is the history of both and makes them deep down, perversely, brothers. In French, brothers was effaced for pareil. You do not recognize the fears of a consciousness that, by struggling with the world, shares the rules of the struggle over the centuries, as through a pessimism into which hopes drown to become more virile. Joyous with a joy that knows no hidden agenda, this army, blind in the blind sunlight, of dead young men comes and waits. If their father, their leader, absorbed in a mysterious debate with power and bound by its dialectics, which history renews ceaselessly, if he abandons them in the white mountains, on the serene plains, piano, piano, tout doucement, little by little, in the barbaric breasts of the sons, hate becomes love of hate, burning only in them, the few, the chosen. Ah, desperation that knows no laws. Ah, anarchy, free love of holiness with your valiant songs.
The whole beginning of the poem under the idea of realpolitik, or politique has to be realistic, we have something like negation without destruction. Realpolitik is something like that, the proposition of a negation without destruction. Can define this opposition. Opposition, in fact, is always negation without destruction. In the common democratic sense, like Democrats against Bush, or in France, Socialist Party against Sarkozy. We find in the poem two excellent definitions of this sort of negation. First, the prose of the clever man. The prose of the clever man. The place, maybe, of the poetry of the revolt. Not the poetry of the revolt, but the prose of the clever man. And after that, protector classicism. Protector classicism. That is definition of negation without destruction, of opposition. And you will note that in both cases, the comparison is with artistic conservative style, is something like academic style in politics. The bitter years are the years of the war for Pasolini, which has been also largely, as you know, in Italy, a civil war between communists and fascists and so on. It's also the years of the tragic death of the young brother of Pasolini, the bitter years. And opposition, negation without destruction is something like to forget the bitter years, to don't have a true relationship to the bitter years. The hurt of opposition, subtraction without destruction, or negation without destruction, is to substitute some rules to the violence of the real. No violence of the real at all, but always rules. I can say to substitute rules of history, rules of economy, to the rupture of an event. And when you do that, when you substitute rules to the violence of the real, you, I quote Pasolini, you share the rules of the struggle with your enemy. You have the same rules as your enemy. And finally, you become, I quote a very strong formula, you become slave of your enemy. You are under the law of your enemy because you have the same rules. You become a brother of your enemy. So, opposition, in the classical democratic sense, is in fact for Pasolini the death of negation. And it is the death of political hope, of historical hope. In this context, Pasolini has a sort of magnificent and melancholic vision. The army of dead young men of the last war, and among them certainly his younger brother Guido, is coming to see their father, their leader. That is in fact the revolutionary leaders of today, the direction of the Communist Party, or something like that. This army is, I quote, blind in the blind sunlight. First, they don't see anything. They come and wait in the white mountains on the Syrian plains. And they see their father, their leader, finally. And they see him absorbed in the very weak form of negation. The very weak form of dialectical negation. This negation is without destruction. This negation is not apart from the power. It's not apart from the state. This negation is only, says Pasolini, an obscure relationship to the power itself. It is, I quote, a mysterious debate with power. A mysterious debate with power. It's another formula to describe democratic opposition. Mysterious debate with power. So concludes the young man in the army of dead young men. So the father is in fact without freedom. He is bounded by the dialectics of power.